everyone, I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick. Thanks for checking out Sarder TV, an idea-sharing platform founded by Russell Sarder, author, investor, and CEO of Netcom Learning. And joining us here in the studios to share some of his ideas is Bill Francavilla, a seasoned financial consultant, in-demand speaker, and author of The Madoffs Among Us. Bill, thanks so much for stopping by to talk about your latest book. So Bill, you've spent over 30 years in the financial services industry. Tell us a little bit about your background and how it helped you prepare to write your latest book, The Madoffs Among Us.
Somewhat of a circuitous route into financial services. My educational background is in psychology and education.
Well, you certainly need that for finance, right?
More so than people think.
Yeah.
This is such an emotional-based business, and if you're truly going to help someone, you really have to listen very carefully and pay close attention and uncover what they are really trying to determine, what their goals are, what their expectations are. So I worked in that field for a few years right out of school and gravitated toward financial services simply because I had such a keen interest. I always wanted to know everything that I know today, and my educational background didn't afford me that opportunity, so I started to learn it. I remember the day I told my wife, hey, I think I'm going to go into financial services. She said, you don't know anything about it. I said, you're right, I don't, but I can learn. So that was back in the mid-'80s, and I was hired by a wonderful firm, Legg Mason, headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland. Terrific people, the highest standards. I loved my 30-year tenure with Legg Mason.
That's amazing. At one company for 30 years. That doesn't happen anymore, does it? In the financial services industry or any industry?
Well, you're right. There's a lot of movement between and among firms, and I know you and I will get into that in a little bit. But you know, I worked as an advisor, and then I worked as a divisional sales manager, and finally at the corporate level, where I was the director of wealth management for the entire firm. And it was enlightening. I loved every aspect of the business, but it was also very illuminating what I found out. Some of the disappointments that financial advisors present to their entrusted consumer base, their customer base, was troubling. So to answer your question, I had all this background, I had all these very, very significant experiences and stories that I hope I'll be able to tell you. And I said, you know what? Not enough people understand that this is a dangerous business. And the overwhelming percentage of financial advisors, really terrific. They do what's best for their client. They make certain that they are at the top of their game from an education standpoint, and they provide the service in a very fair and honest measure. But then there's the bad guys, and it really just disturbs me. I get so angry at these people who, like Bernie Madoff. Now, he stole $65 billion, but there's a lot of more modest or more moderate Madoffs among us that are taking $100,000 or $2 million or $50,000, and it's not right. So I wrote a book. I says, I'm going to expose it, and I'm going to hopefully provide the reader with some substantive measures that they can take to protect themselves from the Madoffs among us.
So now in those 30 plus years, did you or your clients ever get taken in by one of these Madoff type of scams, which we know is very prevalent?
Not the typical Ponzi scheme that Madoff was very famous for. Madoff was taking early money and paying those initial investors with later money. So he accumulated a large number of clients. He was managing their monies, kind of. The people who came late and were giving him $1 million or $10 million or these hedge funds or these feeder funds, he was actually paying the former investors with the latest money. So that's a typical Ponzi scheme. I do have one example that I'd like to share. In my office in Virginia, when I was down there as a retail advisor, there was an attorney who was invited in to our conference room at the request of one of our financial advisors, and she was introducing her clients to this attorney. And the attorney was selling property in North Carolina, at the Outer Banks.
Sounds dubious. No.
I would say.
You're selling property.
And here's the Ponzi scheme. He kept on selling the same property over and over and over again. So when he was found out, well, he took the easy way out, I guess. He committed suicide. But the people who had been in the office of my very wonderful firm, there was kind of a tacit approval on the part of my firm that we were supporting the idea, and we weren't. It was the financial advisor's fault. And it was very disappointing for a lot of people. They just lost their money.
So Bill, tell us, what impact do you hope your book will have, and who, let's say, who's your target audience, especially when you consider, I've been reading statistics that the average American is not even invested in the stock market?
A couple of points, Tracy. Number one, when I started to write the book, I was writing toward the industry's preferred target market. And these are individuals, families in their 50s or their 60s, they're pre-retirement, they're in retirement, they've had the advantage of accumulating a lot of wealth. They are the people who are so often taken advantage of by one of these bad guys. But when I brought the book to my publisher, he said, you know, Bill, I disagree. I think the market is much, much wider than that. And he's right, because we are all susceptible to, you know, making wrong decisions and being taken in by someone who not very scrupulous. Tracy, I will suggest one thing. I think people, most Americans, are engaged in the stock market. It may be their 401k, their 403b, another retirement plan, or maybe they're working for a publicly traded company where if their earnings falter, they run the risk of being laid off.
So by default, they're in the stock market?
Yes.
So to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it's a pretty wide swath of our population. So, but I'm very sensitive to the people who you and I would consider to be the most vulnerable. And it's older Americans, maybe women outlive men. In fact, there's a statistic that suggests that 90% of all women at some point in time will be 100% responsible for their wealth management. And that's daunting, because presently only about 53% of women participate in their family finances. So all of a sudden, you've been working with a husband and he passes away, or a divorce occurs, or there's a split and you're all by yourself. These women are very, very vulnerable, and I am very sensitive to that, and I would love...
What advice do you want to give them?
The advice I would have is to be enter into any situation with a healthy dose of skepticism, because the wolves are always at the door. They're going to come at us via the phone. They're going to come at us via email. They might even knock on our door. They're going to be referred by a friend or another trusted person in our worlds. And so many people will just choose to believe because it's easier. If I can share an example, please. I was fresh out of training. Had some good training. I was licensed and registered. And I was back in my home office less than a week. And a woman called in, and I made an appointment with her, and she came into my office. It really wasn't an office, it was more like a cubicle. I was a novice, and sat down, and I was asking her some questions, and I looked the part. You know, I've got the suit on, the white shirt, I'm a good guy. We've got flashy signs over our building and so on and so forth. Within 5 minutes, she said, I have complete confidence. Whatever you say, I'm okay with it. And I was a little humbling. I said, oh my goodness.
And you were a new broker to the industry?
Yes, yes. It was a little humbling. So, I put her in a total return fund, which was appropriate, I know. But it occurred to me right then and there, what an awesome responsibility I have, because so many people want to believe, put their trust in you, say, here. How many people did Bernie Madoff influence? Don't doubt Bernie. One of his principal investors said, doubt Bernie? Doubt Bernie? You don't doubt Bernie. You doubt God, but you don't doubt Bernie.
I remember that quote in your book, that someone actually said that, yeah. And most of his people were friends of friends, and that's how they
That's
got
right.
involved in it. So they trusted each other. It was that
Exactly.
community. All right, another thing that's going on. What are your thoughts on another newly released data that I read about approximately 6,300 financial advisors who had questionable disciplinary actions or histories? It was not, I guess, disclosed to consumers by the Certified Financial Planning Board, which
Yes.
is responsible for doing that. How did that type of information slip through the cracks, and how are we supposed to protect ourselves
That's it,
when we
really.
don't have the information that we need?
That's such an important question. I appreciate you asking that. It is incumbent upon the individual to seek that information. It's incumbent upon you and I as consumers, as potential clients, to find out if the person with whom we are
But
about
again,
to
the
work.
information wasn't disclosed, so we can't find it out in this particular instance.
Well, I'm going to give you a hack. I'm going to show you how you can do that.
Okay.
The industry will disclose it, but they won't broadcast it. And so many of these charges are allegations. They've not been proven, or maybe they have been proven. So what I encourage people to do, first and foremost, with their current financial advisor or with a prospective financial advisor, is to go online and enter in brokercheck.com.
And that's in your book, so people
Yes.
who read it will be able to see all these
Yes.
fabulous tips on how to do a little detective work.
You bet. And
Okay.
you put the advisor's name and maybe where he or she is working and so on, and you're going to get a lot of information about that financial advisor. What we're looking for are disclaimers. A disclaimer is an allegation or it's a charge. It may have even been proven, maybe it's settled, but the disclaimer is a big key. Most advisors have no disclaimers. 93% have no disclaimers. It's great. Maybe someone has one disclaimer because it was an unwarranted allegation, which automatically goes to FINRA, the Financial Regulatory Authority, who handles these brokercheck.com sites. But check it out. If there's more than two, I'm starting to question. If there's 3 or 4, I'm going someplace else with my money.
So, Bill, tell us, how can investors feel that their money is safe from unscrupulous financial planners and firms in this day and age?
Well, as we discussed, you certainly want to go to brokercheck.com, but I think there's more that you have to do. You have to be an active participant. You have to take a very keen interest in what's occurring in your account. And that takes a little bit of knowledge. I don't think it's difficult to learn just a little bit about the industry, a little bit about the investment process, a little bit about what individual investments a person might have. It doesn't have to be terribly difficult. At the very least, maybe a cursory understanding of why I own this particular mutual fund, or why this person is suggesting this insurance product, for instance. So you can come back as an informed investor, an informed client.
And read our statements every month and notice things that are going on up and down, or how many people don't actually even look at their statements?
Or don't understand them.
Yeah.
It's terrible. I don't think it's nefarious on the part of the industry. I really don't. They try to make it as understandable as possible, the regular statements that you will receive. But there's so much legalese in there, and there are so many requirements made of the firms to report everything. Well, you can get a report back, a statement back, and it might be 7 pages or 20 pages. Who's going to go through all the details? So, but knowing what you own, making certain that there are no surprises. How come this security was sold? It wasn't with my approval. Does this person have discretionary authority? Wait a minute, this is a new security that just appeared on my statement. What's this activity over here? And if you have any questions whatsoever, you go to the advisor and say, hey, help me understand.
So what are your thoughts on how the financial industry has changed with the advent of technology and social media?
That's a wonderful question. It's given the client an advantage because the client has access to more information. They have access to information that previously they may have had to relied upon a discussion with a financial advisor. Now they can independently do it. And as a matter of fact, there are a number of companies who just prefer to offer their investments on an E basis. You know, the Fidelities, the Betterments, the Schwabs, the Vanguards of the world, very transparent. And if a consumer has enough courage and information and knowledge relative to doing it themselves, they have wonderful access to do that. It also presents a danger because we now have portals whereby bad guys can infiltrate and try to retrieve information and block your account or introduce some viruses that would upset your account or even take money from your account. The firewalls that the firms have developed are one step ahead of the bad guys. It's kind of a running battle, Tracy.
It's always, yeah, right.
So I think it's generally a very positive thing.
And what about the impact of these financial apps that millennials tend to use? Do you think financial advisors will become obsolete in, say, 20 years because of the way millennials go about doing their investing? And so it's a whole new way of trying to get your portfolio together.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. I think the advisor, a really well-qualified, articulate advisor who doing the best they can to provide a very high degree of service and make certain that a person's needs are met. I believe there will always be a demand for that. The industry can be confusing unless someone is really confident that they can do it themselves. And I'm okay with do-it-yourself. Just be careful of what you had. It's interesting. I talked to a number of do-it-yourself investors, and I'm no longer in the business, so I'm not looking for their accounts. But I can help people, and I'll ask them some questions, and it's not surprising to me how many of them just don't know better. They're making mistakes every day. So I'm a big advocate of a strong relationship with a superlative advisor.
Okay, so how can we minimize the risks of falling into the clutches of a Bernie Madoff?
3 things. Number 1, you look in the mirror and say, I can be scammed. I can be taken. A lot of very bright people were in Bernie Madoff's world, and they lost billions of dollars. And we scratch our heads, we say, how in the world could that happen? That could never happen to me. Nonsense. It can happen to you. There was a gentleman named Simon Lovell. He was purported to be the scam artist of the 20th century. He would scam people out of, a quarter in their pocket, the watch they were wearing. He was really very good at what he did. Well, he was caught, he was convicted, he went to jail, came out of prison, and started to write books and speak. I love this quote by Simon Lovell. He says, quote, I love it when people tell me they can't be conned, because in my mind, they're halfway to being conned. So number 1, look in the mirror. Number 2, and this is the tough one, avoid buying with emotion. If we can devoid ourselves of buying with greed or buying out of fear or selling as well, making any financial decision based on emotion, we're gonna be okay. And that's tough to do because we're all feeling people and we're all
your hard-earned
human beings.
money and account. You're so invested in it. It's your future, it's your life. So of course it's hard to get the emotional element out of it.
That's right. That's right.
But we have to.
But we have to. Look what happened with the run-up to the tech bubble. Everybody was excited. It was a new economy, and everybody was making untold returns on their portfolios. All you had to do was take a dart and throw it at the Wall Street Journal, and wherever it landed, son of a gun, that stock was going to go up. Those were the kind of the heydays. But we know that there was extreme disappointment immediately following that. I've got some horror stories on that. But that was all emotion driven.
Right.
It was greed. You're going to be left behind. You've got to be invested in this. One of the advisors in one of my offices, he had a young guy who he was working with. He convinced his uncle to take out a second mortgage on his paid-for home and invested in technology. The uncle did. And he lost his home.
Everything, right.
He lost his home. Tragic, tragic. Third, get informed. There's a lot of information out there. It doesn't have to be difficult. It really does not have to be difficult. And a person need not be expert. They just have to have an appreciation for some of the language that financial people throw around. Sometimes I think it's unfair because the jargon in the industry is elusive to most people. What do you mean by structured debt? What do you mean by equity-intensive portfolio? What do you mean by dividend bias?
So we have to learn all those terms.
In my book, and I put together the top 50 terms, and hopefully in an effort to...
Be familiar with them to some degree.
Just be familiar,
Yeah.
just be familiar. I want a client who's going to say, what do you mean by that? Well, that's not my understanding. Well, isn't it true that? That's a good client to have, because it's a team effort. It's not up to the advisor. The advisor is there for objectivity and to make certain that he or she uses their expertise to provide a solution, not to sell them anything, provide solutions.
So if you're looking for a financial manager to manage your money, what are the top 5 questions or concerns you should be asking them?
Great. We hopefully avoid the mistakes that so many of Madoff's clients made, where they didn't ask questions. They were convinced that Bernie was the guru, and that his consistent returns were the norm if you had money.
Is that the greedy emotion coming into play because of the high returns they were getting? So they were...
Yes, they were very consistent.
It was the emotional
they weren't off the
aspect of it.
charts.
Yeah.
But with Madoff, there was a certain level of panache to be honored to be one of his clients. I mean, that was the truism behind it. It was, well, my money is with Bernie. And in their community here in New York, it was, my goodness, if your money's with Bernie, wow, what did you do to deserve that? But the types of questions that you should ask are, number one, tell me about your experience. Have you been in the business 6 months? Or have you been doing this for 20 years? Tell me, how many firms have you been with? Have you been with the same firm for all this period of time? Or you switched firms back in 2014. What were the circumstances of that? A secret in the industry, or it's just a fact that's not fully appreciated. When an advisor moves from one firm to another firm, there's an incentive, and the incentive is financial. So if this one investor or this one advisor is producing, say, $1 million worth of revenue for the firm, Firm B looks at that and says, tell you what we're going to do. We will give you 100% of your trailing 12 revenues. We're going to write you a check for $1 million if you come over to this firm. And we will forgive that loan over the period of the next 5 years, making it easier for the advisor to absorb the taxation. Now, there are good reasons to move firms. The branch manager is a jerk. You don't have the resources. You think that this other firm is going to be far better for your clients. Great, I respect that, but I want to ask that question. If an advisor has been jumping firms every 5 years, they're jumping it for a check. And when they jump a firm, they drag your account along with it. Your interests are not necessarily along with that jump from firm to firm.
So this is still an industry that has longevity then? You don't want that like someone that has that background of 5 years or 3 years, where most companies now in this day and age, the kids stay 2 years or a year and they move on to the next job for more experience. So I
want continuity.
Yeah,
I don't want someone who's jumping for a check every 5 years. There is a trend in the industry where so many advisors are going independent. They might be moving from a big bank or a wirehouse to their own firm, but they'll have the backing of either a broker-dealer or a registered investment advisory firm like a Fidelity or a Schwab or a big name with plenty of capital. That's an interesting trend, and I think that's probably the most significant trend in the industry, where more advisors are going independent, and that's fine. That's fine. I have no problem with that.
Can you ever ask them, or would they have this information about, like, say, their track record? What has been the average rate of return that you've been able to provide your clients? I mean, should they have that information? Is that a fair question you can ask them?
Well, is it a fair question? Because so many portfolios are so different.
But you can do it similar to, say, your portfolio. How have you been doing with, say, this is what I have, what's your rate of return been, say, the last 5 years with similar?
I think that's legitimate. An advisor has to be very careful because they cannot promise or guarantee any types of returns. So they might look back on the past 10 years and say, had you been invested in this type of portfolio, your return would be 9.7%
It depends
annually.
on the markets.
That's right.
So
That's
relative.
correct.
All right, and so what are some warning signs that we should be aware of from money managers that they may not be looking out for our best interests, which we discussed a little bit earlier?
If there's an excessive degree of activity in an account that you have not authorized, I'm going to be a little suspicious of that. Is it in my best interest to take advantage of short-term capital gains and capital losses, or are we in this for the long term? If the advisor is not communicating with you on a regular basis, or is out of town a lot and you can't reach that person, I'm going to be suspicious. I want to make sure that a question that you would ask your advisor: am I going to be working with you personally, or is it going to be a member of your team? Which is fine. I'm okay with working with a team member as long as that person understands what my needs are. I want to ask questions about what their approach is. Tell me your approach. Are you buy and sell? Are you long-term hold? Do you use managed money? Do you have any proclivities relative to the markets? Do you think that the market is going to tank and you are short the market and you are out of the market? Or is the Dow Jones at 27,000 going to move on to 35,000 in the next year or so? Those are important questions. Another real important question is how do you charge? I want my charges to be very transparent. I want to be able to understand them, to read it, and say, okay, I get it, and this is fair, so on and so forth. There's three different ways that advisors will charge. There's a commission-based, and that might be very appropriate for buy and hold clients. They want to buy 1,000 shares of Berkshire Hathaway B, or General Electric, or Walmart, or Altria, or whatever, and they want to hold it for a good long time and take advantage of the dividend maybe. Commission is perfectly fair. The second way is to be charged on assets under management. So if you have $1 million with an advisor and that advisor charges 1% annually, you're going to be charged $10,000. But included in that charge are commission-free transactions.
Okay.
For an active account, that just might be the best way to go. But I would also expect that financial advisor is providing me with not just investment counsel. How about risk management? How about overall wealth management and comprehensive planning? Have you reviewed my will, my trust work? Are you helping me minimize my taxes? It's a whole continuum of items that need to be addressed if you want that type of account. And the third account, which I recommend for the do-it-yourselfer, it's a fee for planning. It's a one-time fee. Maybe there's an annual fee to just revisit, but it might be $2,500. If the account is huge, it might be much more than that. Here's all my stuff, Mr. or Ms. Advisor. What direction do you think I should move in? They do a comprehensive review of everything you own and set you free. They say, okay.
And you would do that every year?
Well, you would do it initially for a higher fee, but maybe a tune-up would be another $500 or $1,000 per year just to make sure there have been no changes and so on. That's not a bad model. That's pretty good.
But you need to know what you're doing.
Yes.
You need to be well-versed in the markets.
Exactly, Tracy. So. You have to have the confidence to go out to a Fidelity or a Vanguard and say, I want a total return portfolio. And what do you have? Let me do some due diligence on the fund selections and we'll make a decision.
So why do you think scams and frauds continue to perpetuate, even though we have all these checks and balances, the internet that can help or hurt? And do you think people that are investing their money are contributing to it a little bit too, because of that emotional aspect of it, where they're saying, "Oh my God, I'm making this much money. This is amazing. I'm just going to keep sticking with this person." So, is it a give and take, both blame for the firm and the client for frauds?
I would say that the client does contribute by not being diligent, by not paying attention. We're going to continue to have scams. There are scams going on right now. I get business periodicals and journals, and I would say a week doesn't go by where if some bad guy out in Missouri or in Hawaii or in New York is absconding money from unsuspecting individuals. It's going to go on because it's so profitable, and people are greedy and they're sociopathic, and maybe they justify in their own minds that, well, I deserve this money, this is what I'm going to do, and they take the money. But with a diligent investor looking very carefully, following their investments, it makes it that much more difficult for them to perpetrate this fraud.
Now, do you think there's certain attributes or personality flaws that we should be leery of when we're working with or looking for financial advisors?
This is a tough question. I wish there was a neon sign
Yeah.
on top of the bad guys that says, "Don't do business with this person. He's a
Let's do
scoundrel."
this personality test. Okay, let's try it on our advisors.
But as a baseline, there's maybe 3 types of advisors one would want to avoid. And the first is the novice.
And that was you.
I was the guy.
And she didn't ask any of those questions.
I was the guy.
But
and
you did okay for her, right?
I did.
You got lucky and she got lucky.
My goodness, I was fortunate, and
Yeah.
so was she, I guess. But now, we all have to start out. And I was in my 30s and starting out in the business, and felt that I was going to do everything I could to help people as best I can. But I lacked the experience. Now, the exception to this is if a novice is starting with an experienced team or a mentor who is looking over the young advisor's shoulder, saying, "Yes, this looks like a good plan. This is a great suggestion to solve the client's problem. I will endorse this and sign off on it. You're doing well." That's the first one. The second one is the advisor who is highly opinionated, and if there are 10 advisors, there could be 10 varying opinions of which way the market's going, how people should be invested. I think the Dow Jones is going to go up to 50,000 on the Dow Jones. There's another advisor who's saying, "Katie, bar the door. It's all over. We're going back down to 5,000." And I read authors on both sides, and they make very, very legitimate points. But I don't want someone with a strong opinion. I want someone to look at my needs and say, "You're close to retirement. You have this much money allocated for retirement. Here's what other measures we need to take in anticipation of maybe a 25 or 30-year retirement. Here's how we can solve this problem, regardless of market conditions." You can do that. You can absolutely do that, and just forget about the noise. And the third advisor we may want to avoid is the salesy person. And that might be the person who invites you to a dinner or a luncheon, and they have one product to solve all your problems. There is no one product that can solve all your problems. Stop it. Don't try to sell me something. Get on my side of the table and help me figure it out. If we can solve this problem together, we've done very well. Tracy, there might be a couple other items that we could use. My personal opinion, and maybe it's a prejudgment, the real flashy guys, men and women, they're driving the Bentleys, they're driving the Rolls, they live in a big house. Are they living beyond their means? I hope not. I hope they're doing okay and they've earned it. But this is just Bill speaking. I'm thinking, come on, don't flash it. I know you're doing well, but have some humility. Be somewhat modest. It's okay. So I'm a little suspicious of that type as well.
So did you keep your Bentley in the garage?
Keep your Bentley in the garage.
No, I'm saying you. Did you keep your Bentley in the garage? If you were going to go see clients, I said, no, let me take the other one. Let me take the other car. Car A and car B.
I drive a used car. It's a nice car.
There you go.
But I enjoy it. But and while we're talking about people we might want to avoid, if a advisor ever asks to borrow money from you, and that happens.
Really happens?
Oh yes,
I can't
it does.
imagine.
Well, if someone has a $20 million account, and the advisor sees all this assets and says, "Hey, listen, Mr. Smith, my goodness, I've got a short-term need. I wonder if you could lend me $10,000 and I'll have it back in your account." That's a huge no-no, but it does occur.
It does occur.
It
I would
happens.
think that would be a red flag at a firm that
Yes.
one of their wealth management people is even doing that.
Well, and as a matter of fact, firms are very, very strict on pushing that type of activity back. It's just flagrant, wrong, and the advisor will be terminated if that comes to bear. Another example is if the advisor has this inventory of financial solutions at their disposal, but they go out here and they want to sell you an unregistered security. Similar to our friend, the attorney, who was selling Outer Bank property, same property over and over again. I have two people whom I know. One person was in my training class. And remember, I told you my firm was the best on the street, my opinion, of wonderful, wonderful people. A woman who sat next to me is serving time in prison. She wanted to start her own firm, and I write about her in the book, Monica. And she was borrowing money, taking money from her clients to establish her own firm, promising 30% returns.
Who would ever expect they'd get 30% returns?
Specifically, there were a number of people who were very close with her, who had a very nice relationship, treated her as a daughter. She treated them as a mom or a dad. Of course, Monica. Oh, sure, no problem. This sounds really great. Honey, what do you think? Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And they write the check.
That was it.
That was it.
Everything's gone.
Everything's gone. Oh yeah, that money's gone.
All right, so Bill, a lot of investors want to hear that they'll have guaranteed rates of returns from their advisors. Now, is this type of market performance even possible? Can you guys deliver on that, or gals?
Guarantee is a word that should never be used in the industry.
So if they say yes, that's another red flag?
Now, there are insurance products that come with a guarantee. We guarantee this death benefit. We guarantee a retirement income at this level once you've owned the policy for a number of years and you reach a certain age. It's guaranteed, according to the insurance company, for instance, until the insurance company goes out of business. And the prospectus, the manual that everyone should pay close attention to, and no one does, is this thick. And you'll read somewhere in there, they'll say, oh, sure, it's guaranteed, unless the economy turns and the business, we are no longer in business, and so on and so forth. Even U.S. Treasuries, they're called riskless investments. There's no real guarantee. We're faced with $22 trillion in debt. We have a deficit of $1 trillion a year. Current administration continues to spend money as previous administrations have done. Unsustainable. So the integrity of the U.S. dollar, is it guaranteed? No.
So there are no guarantees?
No. And that's why...
It's always in the small print.
That's always in the small print. But that's why if an advisor is truly advising and has diversified the portfolio, respectful of a client's comfort, wonderful. The probability of success is greatly, greatly heightened.
So with all the fraud victims out there, why do you think they're actually not reporting that they're victims of scams and abuse? And what do the actual numbers really look like? Do you have any indication of that? Oh, really? Okay.
I do.
Are we going to be shocked Is it going to?
I hope so.
Say let's not invest. Let's
I
not
hope
go
so.
with financial wealth advisors.
Now, this is not just investments. This is scams in general, and it includes charities. It includes romance. It includes home repair.
All right,
so
it's
many
not
other
just,
different
wealth management and
yes,
financial
yes.
firms. Okay.
The federal government has suggested it's over $100 billion per year. Well, that other people have suggested that that is only 20% of the problem. Number one, a lot of people don't know they've been scammed. They are unaware of it. Number two, it's embarrassing. Nobody wants to admit it. So do they report it? No, they don't. It goes underreported. So there's a lot of misconception there. Or people think it's, well, that $100 is gone or that $500 is gone, I'll never see it again. I'll chalk it up to experience. But it's ubiquitous in our society. It's been around forever. People have been scamming each other, stealing, lying, since the Garden of Eden, and here we are today. So it's going to continue because it's just so profitable. Can you imagine you and I getting in business and just scamming people? We have no overhead, and we're just collecting money. The IRS scam that has been popularized, if I may digress, there was a bank of callers from India, New Delhi. This was just a couple of years ago. And the person who spearheaded this, he had a nickname of Shaggy. Shaggy had over 700 employees during the course between 2013 and 2017 calling United States. This is Agent Bill Smith from the Internal Revenue Service. You have an outstanding obligation. Unless it's collected immediately, you have to return this phone call. We are going to dispatch the local sheriff's department. They're going to arrest you. Here's the number. They made $300 million.
Oh, that's so sad
And there's no overhead.
My mom got one of those calls when she was, the IRS called me. I said, no, they wouldn't call you. Don't respond to it. Don't do anything. She goes, but they keep calling. I said, block it, block it.
Good for you, good for you. Now, if I might please, what you did for your mom is what all of us should be doing for our older parents and grandparents. They need our help. This is the group that loses the most amount of money because there may be some cognitive issues. Maybe they're living by themselves for the first time. They're lonely. There's a proclivity to answering the phone. Oh, someone's calling. Who's this? Well, it's a terrible disease. So I encourage people to stop by, visit unexpected. Hey, Mom, how are you? Hey, Mom, do you have any new friends? What kind of phone calls do you get during the day? Oh, you got one from the IRS. You know what? It wasn't the IRS. You know, Mom, can I help you with your statements, with your bank statement? I'm so happy to look over your shoulder and make sure your financial statements are in order. I think my mother had the best response. When she would receive a phone call, she would simply say, oh, you know what? My son handles all of these items for me. May I give you his phone number? Click, click.
Yeah. Like she
You
would
can do that.
give them your phone number anyway, right? That's a good one.
That was a good one.
That's in your book. That should be in your book, right? Okay.
Yes, definitely.
So now, how much of our decision making is based purely on emotions? We did touch on this a little bit earlier. And is this detrimental, let's say, not only to when it comes to investing, but to other sectors in our lives, the way it could all just merge together?
We are guilty of being human, and we are emotion driven. So often we buy on emotion and we justify with facts. We'll make the purchase first, and then we'll justify, oh yeah, I can afford that new car. I look good in it. Or why do realtors place such an emphasis on curb appeal? Or when you are staging the home, you walk in and there's gingerbread baking in the oven, and oh, this feels good. It's an appeal to our senses. And does it influence our decision making? It absolutely does. Absolutely. I don't know what the breakdown between. I mean, we're not all Mr. Spocks, where we can be completely devoid of emotion. We're not. So we get taken in, and you know, some of it's good. I mean, geez, we make decisions on relationships essentially with emotions, and sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't.
So how has technology added to the huge toll of scams on consumers, and do you have any annual figures of all of these losses?
I don't have the annual figures other than to suggest that it is considerable and growing. There's a brand new scam. Just read about it this week. Again, it's IRS related, but it's not a phone call. It's an email that you will receive, and it'll say, this is an important email from the Internal Revenue Service. In order to access this email, you have to, there's some encryption that you have to go through. It's very easy to do. You just press on it and it leads you to the site.
Oh.
Well, the site will do two things. Number one, it could introduce a virus, or it could literally steal your information. So you made a point earlier, the IRS does not work this way. They don't. They do not email us. They will email, or they'll send us a registered mail
Right.
if there's an audit situation. They're not going to call us. So just don't even entertain them. Do not open those messages that are suspicious. And please, please, please be careful with social media. We present way too much personal information on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter accounts. It's not necessary. Everything that we send out on social media, we should ask ourselves, would a bad guy really like to have this information? Where I went to high school? What street all these questions. What street did you grow up on? If you just plug this in and you
Keep
put
it more
in.
generic.
Sure.
TMI, no good.
Because the bad guys will say, hey, I understand you grew up on Mount Carmel Street in Fitchburg, Mass. Is that correct? They got you. Yeah. They got you.
Now, something I've heard recently also, our cell phone numbers are becoming an area where people can find out so much information about us. They're starting to say, don't give out your cell if you don't have to. It's becoming the new Social Security number. Yeah. But we have to provide our cell numbers for so many things, like how are we supposed to work within the confines of that, where they say, oh my God, your cell number is the key to everything in your life.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. A company called First Orion out of Arkansas, they are consultants to the technology companies, the telephone companies, the providers in the United States. 2017, fewer than 4% of all incoming phone calls to our cells were robocalls or scam-oriented. 2018, that percentage grew to just under 30%. 2019, it's at 45%, so almost every other phone call the average American receives is a scam, averaging about 14 per month. They just keep on coming in. Strongest admonition, build your library of people you know, calls that you expect, businesses that you conduct business with, family members, of course.
Yeah, so if it's a no name, don't answer it, then try and block it.
If it's important, if it's important, they'll leave a message,
and
you can respond. This morning, I probably had
three of them
calls.
Already? Yeah, that's
came
what
in,
I get
and I look, I go, oh, come on,
so I don't know
yet
this
another
person.
one. Yeah. It's from these.
And they don't leave a message.
Obscure sites, maybe in Indiana or Minnesota or whatever, or they spoof. And what spoofing is, they borrow your area code with the prefix, the first three numbers of your own call, and you look at it and go,
oh yeah,
wow, who's calling me from Williamsburg, Virginia? Nobody you know.
So Bill, tell us what other types of frauds or scams are being perpetrated that we should be aware of, and especially for seniors in this day and age.
One of the most famous ones is the grandparents scam. And this has been very successful for the bad guys. They will call someone, in fact it happened to a very close friend of mine. He's presently in his 80s. He's a very bright guy. He worked for national security during his career, so he had a spy mentality. He received a phone call from someone purporting to be his beloved grandson. Grandpa, this is Michael. Listen, I'm in Mexico, and I was in a cab, and the cab was involved in an accident, and the driver had some marijuana in the trunk, and I'm being held at the police station. I've got some guy from the U.S. consulate here. hands the phone. Hi, Mr. Jones, agent so-and-so, this is not a big deal, but the Mexican government is requiring that you send $1,500 to make this go away. Now we wonder, couldn't my friend recognize
his grandson's voice?
It's emotion. They're turned around. And I wonder where the bad guys got the information. Got it from social media. I know the dog's name. I know where he lives. I know his friends. I know his grandparents. I know where they live. I can find their phone number and make this phone call.
And they know the kids in Mexico
Yes.
because he's posting all the pictures.
It's emotion.
Yeah.
Now, immediately, and my friend fell prey. He wired the money. And then he stopped. He says, I'm going to call my grandson, who was living in Maryland. He picks up the phone. Hi, Grandpa. How you doing?
Oh, so he did that before he sent the $1,500.
No.
Oh, he already
he sent the money.
Oh, he sent it.
And he felt so foolish, and he knew better. But it happens. It's subtle. It's so subtle, and it preys on emotions. So I don't blame him. I don't deride that. I get it. He got had.
What do you think our best line of defense or weapon is in order to avoid future scams?
I ask people, and I try to do this myself, to approach every opportunity with a healthy degree of suspicion. I don't want to run around being afraid of everyone who might be scamming me, and what does he mean by that, or I'm not so sure that this is the right investment or purchase for me. But I want to participate. I want to take an active role in those decisions. I want to maybe walk away and do some investigation for 24 or 48 hours. Maybe so many people have had people pull up to their front door, knock on the door, and they're selling frozen meat or something. And the byline is always the same. Is, hey, I do business with your neighbor down here. I have an extra box of frozen cold cuts or chops or whatever it happens to be, and I've been authorized to just offer this to you at half price. Now, I'm not going to buy, I like going to the grocery store. I'm going to find my own meat and vegetables and produce and so on and so forth. But I walk away. I want to take a little time and further consider, is this a good idea or is this a scam? That's all. That's all. It's probably perfectly legitimate, but I've heard that come online for a dozen times, I'm sure.
Right, so Bill, we all know taxes seem to eat away at half of our earnings. Is there anything that we can be doing to help minimize a lot of these tax burdens, especially coming from a financial consultant side of the coin?
That's so important. Hopefully you have a relationship with a really good certified public accountant. I think that's a great place to start. I know my CPA has helped me save a lot of money over the years just by minimizing this tax exposure. There are investments that would provide tax-free income, like municipal bonds, which are great, understanding that there's risk involved and that principal could be lost. There are annuity companies sponsored by insurance companies that have a guaranteed, remember that word,
unless
guaranteed?
They go under, unless the insurance company goes under. Right.
A guaranteed rate of return once someone retires. It's called a guaranteed income benefit. There are tax-managed mutual funds. And what that means is you will receive a 1099 no matter what mutual fund you own, but the tax-managed funds, when the manager sells a security at a profit, that manager is also going to sell something at a loss. So your obligation to the IRS is going to be minimal. Those are very attractive. You typically don't have the same type of appreciation, but you also don't have the same type of annual tax obligation.
So Bill, at the end of the book, you talk about the Madoffs among us who could be decimating our financial security right now. Explain what you mean, and can we take steps to avoid this type of catastrophe, and can you share an example?
Those are very broad issues, and they're issues that I've spent a lot of time reading about, studying up on. And there are basically three. There's the possibility of inflation and a more modest possibility of hyperinflation. I mean, we can witness what's going on in Venezuela right now. The average Venezuelan has lost 25 pounds in the past 2 years simply because they don't have enough to eat.
There's no food. Yeah.
No food, and it's a result of hyperinflation, total mismanagement by the government, excessive spending on the government's part, printing money, too many dollars chasing too few goods. Robert Mugabe died just recently. The inflation percentage in his nation was exorbitant. It was over 1 trillion% per year. You just can't live. We've had extreme inflation here in the United States, notably in the late 70s. I remember President Ford had a win button, W-I-N, and he encouraged people to wear win buttons. Whip inflation now. That's not going to whip inflation. I'm sorry. Paul Volcker is the one who whipped inflation by raising rates from the Federal Reserve perspective. But can it happen here? Sure it can. Sure it can. $22 trillion in debt, $1 trillion deficit year after year, unsustainable numbers. Will it lead to inflation? It could. I don't know. It might. Deflation is the opposite. It's when prices go down and you think, oh, that's not too bad. Prices go down, I'll be able to buy more stuff. Well, no, because the value of the currency also is deflated. And Japan has gone through a terrible period over the past 30 years of stagnant growth. There's no incentive. Young people have a very, very difficult time finding employment that is consistent with what they want because these deflationary problems continue to persist. And then there's always the geopolitical. What happens if a flare-up between India and Pakistan takes place? They're both nuclear nations. One lobs a bomb at the other one, and it turns into a conflagration. What will happen to the value of the world's currencies? Where does smart money go at that time? Or what security grows rapidly? It's precious metal. It's gold. Do I think everyone should go out and buy gold? That's up to you. That's an individual choice. And I'm not a gold bug. Some people think that you put everything in gold. No, you shouldn't. But this tariff situation between the United States and China, I think it's very dangerous. Back in 1930, the Smoot-Hawley Act, which was a tariff war against Europe, designed to protect American farmers, exacerbated the Great Depression. It really added a lot of fuel to the fire, and that's one of the reasons we had such a protracted depression area. And I'm looking at what's occurring right now and I'm thinking, could this happen again? It could. It could. So, knowing where your investments are, making certain that your investments are positioned to solve your problems is of tantamount import. That is critical. Should someone have 5% of their investable assets in an asset class similar to gold or silver? Maybe. It's up to them if they feel better with that commodity. But it's a dangerous world. We just have to be prepared and, again, approach healthy suspicion.
All right, you've been in the business for 30 years. Do you feel successful, and have you been able to, you think, accomplish your goals and those of your clients?
Well, I thank you for that question. I think I'm just starting to scratch the surface. I want to get out there in front of the media, and I want to challenge people to really take some proactive measures whereby they can secure their own wealth management. It takes some effort. It takes a lot of homework. It takes participating and making certain that each individual, they don't have to be experts, but they have to have an appreciation for with what's going on, asking the right questions, and maybe consorting with friends and other people. Hey, this is what I own. What are your thoughts here? What do you know about it? Hey, let's help Nana. She's in her 80s right now, and does anyone know where her will is? Does anyone know what the beneficiary designations are? If I can get that message out that it is, again, incumbent upon people to have more responsibility, then I will feel successful. But that's a lot of information that has to get out to a lot of people. So I thank you so much for helping in this process by interviewing me and making certain that we get the word out.
Are you feeling hopeful that there isn't a Madoff among us lurking?
There are Madoffs working out there right now. They just haven't been discovered yet. Hopefully they will be. But it's too tempting. It's too lucrative. It's too easy.
Too easy.
For so many of these bad guys to go after the most vulnerable among us.
What do you think investors, regulators, governments, banks, etc., can be doing to help fend off the next Madoff amongst us crisis?
They're doing a very good job. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the Financial Regulatory Authority, the state corporate commissions, they are doing everything they can to seek out where these problems exist. But they're policemen, just like our wonderful policemen here in New York City and throughout the country, are doing everything they can to thwart crime. It's reactive. It's typically after the crime takes place that they're there to sort it out. SEC, FINRA, state corporation commissions, the same thing. They are there to clean things out and to find the bad guys and to put them in prison and to punish them to the best of their ability, hopefully discouraging other people to embark upon those activities, which they invariably will, just because it's as I mentioned, it's very lucrative. So they're out there right now doing it. Now, the industry has recently focused on standards, whereas previously a financial advisor was encouraged, it was expected of them to make suitable investments. If an investment is suitable for Tracy, fine. I've done my obligation to the industry and to Tracy. They've enhanced that game. It's now best interest. And it seems like a minor change, but it's rather significant. Is this in the best interest of Tracy? Is this investment really going to get her to where she wants to be? So they've added some teeth to the law. Hopefully it'll have a good result, good focus. But I have a lot of respect for these people. They do a great job.
Well, Bill, you did a great job with this book. It was fascinating talking to you about the Madoffs among us. Good luck with it.
Thank you so much. So nice to meet you.
And that just about does it for this edition of Sarder TV. We hope you enjoyed and learned something new today. Until next time, I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick. Thanks for watching.